Hey guys, so today I wanted to do the story that I've been teasing for a long time on this channel. It's a story that I've never heard anyone else do any sort of video or reporting on. There have been very few articles since the time that it happened on this, news articles or anything like that. So I'll just get right into it. This is something pretty crazy that happened back in 1978. It happened on August 3rd, to be specific, in Salt Lake City at the International Dunes Hotel. The name has since been changed a few times. It was the Shiloh Inn and now it is the Holiday Inn Express. It's gone through like major renovation and everything, so the building's very different than it used to be. But basically what we are discussing today is what you may call a mass suicide, possible homicide. It's a very interesting story that we may never know the full details of. But when I found out about it, I couldn't stop researching it. I got a police report on it and I got more information than I've ever found online. So I will tell you all about that now. In this incident, there are 7 people involved. There is 8 members of the family total, of this immediate family, 2 parents and 6 children. Apparently what had happened, and we still don't know what the thinking was behind this, it's definitely a cult mentality. When you hear some of the later articles and the later statement from one of the survivors, it's a very interesting motive behind what happened. So on August 2nd, the day before this incident happened, the father of the family, who had changed his name to Manuel David, died. He was found in Immigration Canyon in Utah, I assume, and he was the victim of self-inflicted carbon monoxide poisoning. Now, he and his family were living currently in the hotel, in 3 rooms of the hotel to be specific. Room 1104, 1105, and 1106. These were adjoining rooms that the family had together. They had been living there since May 31st of 1977, so a little over a year they had been at this hotel. So I'll start with the night of the father's death. We don't know much detail behind his death other than it was a suicide. One of the shop owners who ran a shop across from the hotel called the police after what we will discuss happened on the 3rd and told them that he knew the mother of the family quite well. He'd gotten to know the family over time that they had been there, as they did a lot of shopping in his store. He said that the night of August 2nd, his wife got a phone call from Mrs. David, and this is Rachel David, who is age 38 at the time. This man's name was Mr. Lou Dornbush, and he owned the Dornbush Deli nearby. His wife got the call from Mrs. David, and she had requested that Mr. Dornbush come and assist her with something. He drove to the hotel to pick her up. She was very hysterical. He took her back to his place of residence to be with him and his wife and calm her down. She told them that her husband had been found dead, that he had killed himself, and that she did not know what she was going to do. Understandably so. She also told Mr. Dornbush that she had been told by the hotel management that she had to be out of the hotel the following day. So that was a lot for her to take in. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know where to go. She had 6 children with her. She let him know that she had no money, and she was afraid that she would get separated from her children in this whole thing of having to find a place to go. Mr. Dornbush obviously felt for her. He told her that there was organizations that he could hook her up with that would help her and help her get back on her feet and find a place for her and the children to go. He said that they spent several hours together planning on what they were going to do. He told her to go back to the hotel that night. He would take her back and to get all of her things packed, everything in boxes, and he would send for someone to pick them all up the following day, and he would store them for her. I mean, he was going above and beyond to help her, which was really nice of him to do. They talked about enrolling the kids in a public school nearby, and Mrs. David was very uneasy about this. She didn't like the idea of her kids going to public school, and she didn't think that they would adjust to it well. But regardless of this discussion, he took her back. I believe he picked her up around 7:30 that night. He took her back to the hotel around 11:30 that night. And he said she had calmed down. She was as sensible as one can be in that situation, and he did not suspect that anything would go wrong. He told her that he would see her the next day. Another thing to be noted that was odd about this family, and that sort of coincides with Mrs. David's worry about the kids going to public school, is that the family was oddly private for being tenants at the hotel. The hotel staff said that they knew nothing about them. They didn't know any of the names of the kids. They had never really seen the kids very much. And when the cleaning, like the maids and stuff, would come in to clean the rooms, the children would actually be moved from room to room so that they would be kept separate from the cleaning people that would come in. So everybody thought that was kind of odd. Most of the time, if you work at a hotel and there are tenants there, you sort of get to know them a little bit, but nobody ever really got to know the family, especially not the children. So now we move on to the day of the major incident that I am here to tell you about. This happened on August 3rd of 1978, and the police responded to a call of a man throwing his children from the balcony of one of the rooms of the hotel. Now, a lot of the witness statements keep saying that they suspected it was a man. However, it was in fact Mrs. David, the mother of the children. There are a few different witnesses in the reports. Most of them worked at a construction site nearby the hotel, and they saw the most of what had happened. One of which was running towards the scene as soon as he realized what was going on to help, but by the time he got there, it was over. The family members that were involved in this incident were the mother, Rachel David, who was again 38 at the time, a daughter by the name of Deborah David, who was age 12, another daughter by the name of Rachel David, who was 15, son by the name of Joshua David, who was 13, another son, Joseph David, who was age 9, another daughter, Rebecca David, who was age 6, and the youngest, who was oddly named David David. However, the family had previously been under the name Longo, so his name would have been David Longo at the time of his birth, and sadly young David was only 8 years old at the time of this incident. The witnesses, who again were mostly construction workers, mostly saw 4 of the 7 bodies and what happened to them, with the exception of one construction worker who witnessed the entire thing from beginning to end. The only thing that he did not witness was where the bodies basically ended up, as from where his vantage point was, where his view was of the incident, he could not see the ground level. He stated to the police that he saw the family go out on the balcony. He witnessed them all out there at once, and he said it looked like they were praying, and that just sort of caught his eye, and he continued to watch. He then described in detail to the police how he witnessed 7 bodies jumping or being thrown from the balcony. He said that the entire ordeal lasted 3.5 to 4 minutes total, and it happened at about 7:13 in the morning was when it began. The first body to fall appeared to be that of a young girl, and it appeared that she was thrown. She was the only one that anyone heard a peep out of during this whole ordeal, and she screamed on her way down. The second appeared to be another young girl who landed on the sidewalk, and her body bounced into the gutter area nearby. The third was a young boy, which is believed to be David, the 8-year-old boy. He is the only one who appeared to have resisted, therefore his death is listed as a homicide rather than a suicide, whereas the others are listed as suicides, even though it's still, you know, a little unknown whether all of them willingly jumped or if they were thrown, as the younger children were definitely assisted by the older adults. But obviously at a young age they probably didn't realize what they were doing, so they may have gone willingly not knowing that they were going to be killed. So the third boy that was thrown over managed to hold on to the railing as he was thrown, hold on for a few moments before his hand slipped and he fell with the rest of his siblings. The rest of the siblings seemed to have jumped off and landed either on the sidewalk or on the awning above a restaurant below. After the last body was thrown or jumped off of the balcony, the final person, who was the mother, Rachel David, walked back into the doorway of the room, appeared to look around. She turned back to the balcony, climbed on a chair that they had placed there to help the smaller children get up on the balcony, paused about 10 seconds or so, and then jumped herself. Now, when police arrived, there were 3 victims still alive during this whole ordeal. I know that Rachel David, who was the 15-year-old daughter, survived, and the youngest, David, who tried to hold on, was still alive at the time. I don't know who the 3rd victim was that was alive. It wasn't clear, as, again, nobody knew the family. Nobody that lived there knew the names of the children. Nobody that worked at the hotel knew their names. They did not have any other family nearby. The only other family member really will come into play in a moment shortly, but that person didn't know much either. So nobody was able to properly identify the kids for a day or two. Therefore, nobody knew who the still living child was. All 3 survivors were immediately taken to different hospitals. Rachel was taken to LDS hospital with massive abdominal injuries and fractures. And David and the other child, who we don't, again, know which one it was that survived the initial fall besides David, one of them was taken to Primary Children's Hospital and the other was taken to Holy Cross Hospital. Police contacted the hospitals later that afternoon, and as of 1:45 p.m. that day, the only one still alive was Rachel David. Unfortunately, the other 2 had passed by the time they got to the hospital or as of arriving to the hospital. She was in surgery at the time of their checkup, and she was given 22 units of blood in order to survive, and she was still in critical condition at this point. Again, we don't know much besides what the motive was ultimately listed as, which was psychological trauma. But we don't know much behind the family and what was going on behind closed doors, other than that they seem to become suddenly very religious, change their last name to David. I believe the husband's original name was not Emmanuel either, but he changed it to Emmanuel David, and it very much became a cult-like family. I'll give a little more detail now on the original story, what I have, and then I'll go forward a little in the future and as to why I say it is a cult-like thing. Now, while the officers were up in the hotel rooms, originally they worried that someone was still up there, someone who had thrown these kids off or something. Very quickly they got up there, realized no one was there, and from all the witness statements, they realized that the person who was responsible, the mother, was dead. While they were in the room collecting any sort of evidence that they could, they found an address book. This address book had some family members, had some friends listed, and one family member that they noticed was the brother of the father, Emmanuel David. They contacted his brother, who, according to him, had not spoken to the family in 7 or 8 years. He was living in Denmark at the time of these deaths. When they told him what had happened, he said, of course, he would fly right over. He would let them know as soon as he got a flight. I believe he brought his mother with him, and that's where Rachel David was originally from, was from Denmark. Excuse me. It was 9 or 10 years since he had actually talked to the family, so he didn't even know half the kids, that they even existed. He didn't know their names, anything like that. But he agreed to come and do his best to ID the ones that he was aware of and his brother and sister-in-law. On the 4th of April, the police went to the airport to pick up the brother and mother of Emmanuel David. They took them immediately to the hospital to see the one survivor, Rachel. She was still in critical condition, wasn't really responsive at that time, but they went to visit her nonetheless, as she was their family. They were then taken to a nearby Howard Johnson's hotel to stay and were further questioned by the police. The brother informed them that their last name had previously been Longo, and that for some reason his brother had decided to change their names to David. He knew that they had converted to the LDS church after the father had returned from a mission trip, and that he had begun having strange visions and ideas and left the main area that they had lived in previously. And after that, he sort of lost touch with the entire family. So this little immediate family very much became their only source of social interaction was with each other. Again, nobody knew them. Hotel workers didn't know them, maids didn't know them. The only person that knew them was Mr. Dornbush, who ran the deli nearby, that they obviously had to get food somewhere, so they got it from him. The funeral for the family was held on August 9th at 10 a.m. at Taylorsville Cemetery. The bodies were originally handed by Larkin Mortuary. There was a mix-up originally on who the surviving child was and which one had passed, but that was quickly cleared up, and the service for the funeral was held at graveside. Now, the original article reporting on this with the New York Times back in 1978 has some quotes from some police officers who had questioned nearby witnesses, done the investigation on this terrible tragedy. They said that all indications were that they were religious fanatics and decided to join their father in death. They believed that he was the Holy Ghost, Jesus Christ, and God, all three at the same time. And this was stated by a policeman who claimed to have been a close friend of Mr. David. He said that the family was devoted to each other, extremely so, and that these people would completely be lost without the father. And I think a big part of that is that they were very secluded from the rest of society and the rest of their family. So of course they would rely on the father. Now, the next reporting on this story that I found, and this was one of the things that sort of caught my eye when I first heard about the story, is in 1993. Inside Edition reached out to the surviving daughter. Apparently they did an interview with her, but I have not been able to find any tapes on this. If anybody finds anything about this, let me know, but I have searched long and hard and have not found anything other than this article reporting on it. Rachel David, who was the sole survivor and 15 at the time of the incident, said back in 1993 that she still believes that her father is God and will return to Earth. She is actually quoted as saying, "I remember my father said he will be back. I know he will. And my father never lied." And according to Inside Edition and the interview that they did with her, she has tried to follow the suicide of her family and attempted suicide herself many times since 1978. She had not been heard from or tracked down until Inside Edition correspondent Dan Noyes found her for this interview. At the time, they found that she was confined to a wheelchair, probably from her original injuries, and lived with an uncle by the name of Lennart Erickson, and their location was not disclosed. However, her current location is disclosed later, and I'll get to that in a moment. David, Manuel David's original name was Charles Bruce Longo, by the way. So he changed his name fully from, just a very, I guess, normal, regular, everyday name to a very religious name, which sort of lays on thick the theory of this being a cult. Rachel, at the time of this interview, told them that she jumped willingly at the age of 15 and believed that her death and those of her family were ordained. Now, as time has passed, apparently this little cult has grown. I don't think that there's that many members of it. However, it's enough to warrant a few little articles in the news. There are many people that believe, similar to the Children of God cult, who they think this person who did this thing was correct, and they follow him and they are waiting for his return patiently. So this article touches on that a little bit, and this was written in 2008. And this person who they speak to is a family member of the Davids. I believe is a family member of the Davids. That, or he changed his name just to be like them. I'm not sure how you pronounce this name, Matthias, Mattias. He also believes that Emmanuel David was Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit. And he stated to this article, to this news crew, that people would say that it's a sign of madness or obsession, but he said they can think what they want, but it's not true. In recent weeks, according to this article in 2008, he had been sending letters to the LDS church leaders and the media proclaiming Emmanuel David as God. The cult was tiny 30 years ago and remains that way today, with only a handful of true believers, according to this article, which I will link below. He predicts fire from the sky, this is Matthias speaking, will eventually destroy David's enemies. He thinks that Mount Timpanogos is going to land on Manti or Manti. It will be picked up and dropped on Manti. However, he's not personally proposing to do anything destructive. So this is someone who's just sort of worshiping and thinking this is all going to come to fruition and he will be right in the end. And at this point, they did ask about Rachel. Matthias said that she is currently in Sandpoint, Idaho, in a care center there, a very nice care center. She's believed to have had, obviously, some brain trauma and some serious injuries that she's had to live the rest of her life with from this original incident. And according to this article, in the 70s, there were some FBI officials who accused Emmanuel David and his followers of supporting the group through fraudulent fundraising. Matthias David admits he pled guilty then to wire fraud, but claims he didn't really do it. So again, cult-like mentality. Just sort of everyone sticking up for one another and saying that this is going to end up being true and they're going to end up being right and thinking that Emmanuel David is God. So that is really all there is on this story. It just struck me as very interesting because it's not something that's widely reported on. It's not something that's widely known. However, it's extremely odd and, you know, stuck out when I first heard it. There is a video on YouTube that I will link below where someone actually went to the hotel and stayed there, and they claim that there has been some odd occurrences that happened there. Possibly it's haunted, nobody knows for sure, but I'll link that below because it was very interesting and it was the only thing I could really find on the story. I hope you guys enjoyed this story. I very much enjoyed it when I first learned about it. I thought it was very interesting and couldn't stop reading about it. I hope you guys liked the creepypasta that I read the last 2 weeks, and I will have another interesting true crime story coming up next week, most likely. I've already got it in my head. I just have to lay it out, film it, edit it, all that jazz. So yeah, comment below if you guys have any suggestions. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.